Maybe the reason that some of our questions leave us aching, leave us wandering away fearful and hurting and not sure what's next is because those questions were meant to transform us. All right, so we are going to continue in our movement through Lent with our own personal journeys of resurrection and really understanding who we are, created new in the image of God and in the love of Christ Jesus. And so, how many of you all have had a child in your life that was constantly questioning everything? You know? Yeah, right? Constantly questioning. And how many of you, those children, are no longer what we typically think of when we think of children, and they're still constantly questioning everything? Exactly. I like that you guys can't see Pat behind you. So if you ever see me laughing or nodding my head, it's either Pat or Omi. One of them's getting crazy back there. But, you know, that's one of the things is like we don't tend to recognize how important questions are. And sometimes we may think we like questions until it starts to become like this. As you all could see, at least a little bit from the video, you know, it was very much this cute little girl of, it's time to brush your teeth. Why? Because you need to get ready for bed. Why? Because, and it just went on and on and on. It was like, but that's not for you. Why that not for me? And it just went on and on and on. You know, and at some point, I think we do stop asking questions, but is it really because we've come to know everything? How many times do we come into a space where we stop asking questions because we think we won't ever get the answer we want to hear? Or we think we might not get any answer. Or perhaps we stop asking questions because we are fearful of the answer. But the thing is, God never tells us to stop asking questions. You know, faith is not the absence of questions. There's a lot of time in our faith journey where it's like, just trust in God, trust in the process, trust that the Holy Spirit will lead you. Well, what about, no. You just trust. Just trust. And the thing is that there isn't a place where God is saying, don't question me. God is bigger than any question we have, and God is so confident in what God is doing that those questions are welcomed. And how else are we supposed to find our way? What is the classic stereotype that was put on men that I grew up with? If they were getting lost, they would not ask for directions. They would not question, how do we find it there? My favorite is when we wander through a store of any kind, but we'll just go with, you know, the grocery store. And we wander and wander, because, you know, you could go to a Walmart in Maryville and things look one way. You could go to a Walmart in St. Joe and things could look a totally different way. But instead of, you know, we've read the signs, nothing's making sense, and instead of asking the individuals in the blue vest, we will spend an extra 5-10 minutes walking up and down the aisle. Where could this be? Because there's something that might go wrong if we go up to Sam in his Walmart vest and say, hey, can you tell me where I can find the canned goods? I just can't see them. Obviously, it's never that easy, but it's just interesting to me how much we fear asking questions. I know for me personally, I think it comes down to, I'm afraid that my question may be burdensome. You know, like everything is set, everything is this way, and sometimes I feel that if I stop and ask a question along the way, it may be burdensome. I know on the reverse end of that, sometimes the reason that I don't like questions along the way is because in my mind I have it all figured out. So if you all just trust and just listen, I bet all your questions will be answered. Well, both of those are not exactly the best way of thinking. You should never be afraid to ask a question because you think you might bother someone or you think it might be a dumb question. Isn't that the old classic adage, the only stupid question is the one that wasn't asked? I always love the idea that if you have a question, Ask it, especially when you're in a room or a crowd, because there's a good chance someone else in that room has that question. The other reason I would encourage it in one-on-one situations, whether it's in relationships with your friends, with your family, your children, your neighbors, your boss, is that we're not mind readers. Now, I understand that we can have gifts of clairvoyancy, and you can also get to know someone for quite a period of time where you say, well, I just know how he would handle that. I just know what she's thinking. I've seen them do it time and time again. But that's how we box someone in. You never know when the person that you are speaking to has decided that day they were making a change based on the transformation they've been experiencing. So like I always tell you all, when you meet someone, meet them brand new, because we are forever growing. You're not the same person you were when you were here yesterday, when you were here last Sunday. You're not going to be the same person tomorrow, because you are in a constant process of unfoldment. You are in a constant journey of transformation. And maybe sometimes it's like a rubber band. You know, you can stretch a rubber band, and then when you let it go, it returns to what you think is the same size. But if you were to take it under a microscope, you would see that the molecular structure has changed just a little bit. And so it's like that, you know, sometimes we hold back on our questions because we think we know. But the thing is, then we're not giving that other person a chance to, one, help us in our doubt and in our curiosity, and at the same time we're not giving them a chance to show us perhaps they have grown. Perhaps they do know something more. Perhaps they have the answer to our question that's going to take away all of the confusion, all of the curiosity. It's easy to think that if you're asking questions, then it's showing that you have doubt or fear. Now, there's a story in the Bible, it's in Mark chapter 9, where a father brings his son to Jesus. And he brings the son to Jesus and he says, my son is possessed. And I took him to your disciples and they couldn't heal him. We've tried everything, and these demons, they're doing things to my son that's going to have him meet his death. And he looks to Jesus and he says to Jesus, will you help me in my unbelief? He says, I believe, help my unbelief. He is questioning Jesus. And did Jesus get upset with him for questioning him? Did Jesus say, how dare you question my disciples? They've been traveling with me all this time. They know what they're doing. That must be on your son. Or did he say something like, you know, the fact that you questioned our miracle working ability, no cure for your son? No, not at all. He took the time to speak with the gentleman, and then he commanded that demon out of that boy to a point where it looked as if the boy died and Jesus brought him back to life. But this is just about that one part. Was there anything wrong with that father saying, why? How come after I took him to all these different places, why? Why wasn't he healed? And be careful, because sometimes you'll get thrown this answer. I always tell you all to move them out, and you need faith like a mustard seed. Now I'm going to flip that coin over for a moment. And don't let anyone tell you, well, the reason it didn't get healed was because your faith wasn't strong enough. But if your faith was strong enough, then that healing would have came. Okay, well, then that's the first time I'm going to look back at that person and say, well, if your faith is strong enough, you could overcome my lack of faith and do the healing anyway. So don't let it trip you up on he who has the strongest faith is going to get the healing. But he who asks the questions, he who's not afraid to be curious, he who's not afraid to be fearful and doubtful, he who's not afraid to trust the process and still ask the questions will get to see more. We'll get to experience more. We'll get to understand more. And maybe it's not in that moment. Maybe in that moment, that father walked away and said, well, he still didn't really tell me why the disciples weren't able to heal him. But it doesn't matter. He took the time to ask the questions. Jesus does not rebuke us. God does not rebuke us for taking the time to say, why? But why, God? Having questions will never mean you have a lack of faith. And so I would like to invite you all into a place that we won't call the chancel of First Christian Church, but we are going to call it the game show of What's in the Box. Now, in order to have a game show, I am going to need a contestant. And so, since we know it is okay to have fear and doubt and be a little intimidated by what our crazy pastor is up to this morning, you can come with all of those feelings. But unlike God, I don't want any of your questions. Now, who's going to be my brave volunteer? Alan! Perfect. Alan, are you good with doing the stairs, or do I need to bring this down? Okay, awesome. Pat, you got it coming later. All right, we're going to have to blindfold you, sir. All right, while they're getting that done, can we get a round of applause for Alan? Woo! He is the next contestant on What's in the Box. We couldn't blindfold him up here. That would make it too easy, you know. All right, so I am going to place you in front of these boxes. You got any questions for me? Too bad. There's no questions. Remember, I just told you couldn't ask any questions. That was just a trick question, you know. So, it is. So I'm going to have you reach into this box, and you can try and see what you find in that box. Are you ready? How are you feeling? Is your heart doing good?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Oh, not that one. Be careful. You don't want just that one. Trust me. That's right. Keep going. All right. Keep going. There you go. Reach in. Aha. All right. Okay, good. Ready for the next one? All right. Okay, and here is your last one. How'd that feel?
Good.
All right. That might not be what you think it is. Is that kind of warm? I'm not sure on that one. So, Alan, you can take off your blindfold. All right. So, what do you think was in box 1? Yeah. And what did you think was in box 2? Ah, okay, but it is beads, yes. And box 3? Water, absolutely. But Alan, could you tell me, maybe I should do this so then people can hear you. Can you tell me what you felt in getting ready to come up here, even when you were down there and you still had the blindfold on and we had to escort you up the stairs?
I didn't know what I was getting into.
Right, absolutely.
Right. But I don't, it's kind of a weird feeling to feel things without seeing it first.
Absolutely. And how did you feel being volunteered by Pat to do this, and we just went with it and pulled you in?
His time's a-coming.
Yeah, and as you went forward into each box, what did you feel in those moments?
I hope it wasn't a mousetrap or something.
Did you have any excitement?
Excitement? Yeah.
Yeah. Any curiosity?
Mm-hmm.
Any fear?
No.
No fear. All right.
I trust you.
Oh, good. There you go. That's awesome.
Trust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Alan, for being up here. Let's give Alan another round of applause. Okay. And so, isn't it interesting that sometimes we get called into a situation, sometimes we choose to go into a situation, other times we get voluntold into a situation. And we can have all of these different feelings around it. Sometimes we don't even focus on our role because we're so upset on how we ended up in it that we might be like, Pat, your time is coming. But other times we'll be like, gosh, I knew I should have never got involved in this situation or with this particular person because now look what's happening and I don't even know what's happening. As he came walking up here, he was willing, although he didn't know what he was getting into. He was trusting because of who was asking him. And he was curious, and I would think he was having a little fun with it as we were moving through it. But even though he said he wasn't afraid and he was curious, I'm sure there was still that relief that it wasn't a mousetrap, that it was really far more simple than probably any of us were thinking, and at the end of the day, it was some water, some beads, and some cotton balls. And I understand that not all journeys of life are going to come out that exact smooth with the laughter and the, this was nothing. But the truth of the matter is when you are in a moment, it's the only place you can be. When you are present in a moment, it's the only place you can be. And so if in that moment you have a question, ask the question. God encourages you to ask the question. And if you trust in God even a little bit, like Alan was trusting in me, then that should help release some of that fear. You know, imagine if you were to be traveling and all of a sudden you knew that I was coming up upon a bridge. And as you start to walk upon the bridge, you notice that there is fog as you get further along the bridge. You're like, gosh, how long is this bridge? Where is the other side? And if the fog gets so dense and so thick, how do I know the bridge goes all the way? You can't see the other side, but you keep walking. We took his glasses. We took his ability to walk up here confidently, but he still did because he trusted that despite the fog of the blindfold and Gina's silliness, that the bridge goes all the way to the other side. Faith is being able to continue on that bridge, asking those questions, even when you can't see the full picture. And when you have a strong faith, it's never the absence of questions. In Jeremiah 33, God says, "Call to me, and I will answer you. Tell you great and unsearchable things you do not know." There are some things that the only answers are going to come from the divine. Whether it's the divine within, whether it's through divine researching, as in reading the word, whether it's listening to a particular teaching, whether it's sitting in the silence that's also divine, there are some of the questions that we have within us that are only going to be answered in those sacred places, in the sacred stillness. And just because that's the only place where we can find the answer, it doesn't mean we don't ask the question. And just because we might be afraid of the answer, or the answer might take longer than we expected, it doesn't mean that we don't ask the question. Faith is never shutting down your questions. It's bringing them up. And if you can't get answers anywhere else, then it's starting where you should have started to begin with, and that's asking God. Ask God. He's not afraid of your questions. God is confident in all that God is. God's promise in Jeremiah is that if you seek, it'll be revealed to you. Isn't that what we just talked about the other day? Seek and you're going to find it. Knock, that door will be open to you. So let's be honest, as we're talking about questions, we don't always feel permission to bring up questions, especially in settings of church. Especially when we might be lower on the totem pole in an organization. Especially after you've sat through a long engagement and everyone's tired and ready to go and you're like, but I got one more question, but you don't want to hold anyone up. We don't always feel that we have permission to ask questions. And you know what? It's not just about church and the workplaces and in our families. Sometimes it's just in life. We're afraid to ask those questions of, why is this happening? How did this go wrong? We're afraid to ask those questions when we're in grief. We're afraid to ask those questions when we're in the waiting. I had a beautiful experience. I got to go to Warrensburg for a funeral of a very wonderful woman. Her name was Shirley Doherty, and she served that congregation for years upon years. It was the first time I walked into the Warrensburg church in over 2 years, because I made myself a promise that I would not touch that door handle until I knew I could walk in there without regret or resentment. I refused to ever walk in there and be like, oh, I wish I was here and not with those Maryville people. I refuse to ever walk in there and be like, oh, they're so lucky I'm coming in here because I don't want to be here right now. So I had to wait, and I had to trust that the question was, God, when is it going to be the right time for me to walk into that church? Because when I was in that church, I definitely didn't ever think I would be in this church. At whatever reason, this past Thursday was the right time. And as I encountered different people and they asked all those wonderful questions, how are the kids? How's your new church? Does it feel like home? Are you settling in okay? And then I had one particular person say, well, I'm just going to ask. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what she's going to ask. Are you still with Travis? that all, and I understand. Because what was the question? Did she feel like it wasn't her place? Was she afraid of the answer she was going to get? Was it she knew that that was none of her business? I don't know. But I smiled when she asked me the question. And it's one of those interesting things of why do we build up so much fear around questions? This is what I tell my children, and this is what I'll tell you all. Ask the question. I'm going to answer it if I know the answer, but you better be ready for the answer too. You better be ready. Don't come up to me and say, well, do you think this looks really good on me? Sure. What is your definition of does this look really good on me? Did you enjoy that dish I made? Yes, as much as I enjoy throwing up in my mouth. No, I would not say those things, but it's one of those things. Why do we ask the questions if we're not looking for the answer? And what scares us away from the question? If we look at these questions, instead of looking at them with fear, we look at them as an invitation to know more, an invitation to put an end to our doubt and to our fear, an invitation to wrestle. And when I say the word wrestle, I don't know who comes up in your mind, but Jacob comes up in my mind. Now, if you guys remember the story, Jacob was going to meet Esau, his brother, and they had that falling out so many years ago. And I know I preached this message one time in here that when he was going to meet his brother, he sent his servants, he sent his family, he sent cattle and crops and gifts on ahead of him. And he stayed back because he was afraid. He had questions. How is he going to greet me? What is going to happen? Does he want to kill me? Will he accept me? Will he accept my children? God, why am I going through all of this? Am I worthy of seeing my brother after I stole his birthright and his blessing? Am I even worthy of being alive and having all of the abundance I have when I'm about to meet the brother I cheated? As all of those questions came to his mind and he sent all of his family forward, he was alone. And he was there with his regrets and his worries and all of his what ifs. And you know what? He never saw it coming. Bam! Here comes someone who decides to help him in his questioning, to help him in his wrestling, to get with him. And Jacob was wrestling with that individual, came in WWE style, tackled him down, and wrestled with him through the night. And we come to learn that that was God. And as they are wrestling, Jacob does not give up. He's like, I'm going to hold on to this. I am going to fight, and I am going to fight, and I am going to figure out who this person is, what they're doing here, and what this all means to me. And he didn't just sit back with his questions. He wrestled them out. And God did not reject him. He met him full on. He met him full on in a wrestling match to say, I'm going to meet you here. And you know what's interesting? And one of the most striking parts to me, one of the most impactful parts of this is how it all ends. After they wrestle and wrestle through the night, God touches Jacob's hip socket and done. It's done. It's over. And he gives Jacob a new name. He gives Jacob a blessing. And through all of the questioning, through all of the wrestling, Jacob gets his answers. And he ends up walking away with a limp. And God doesn't heal that limp. Jacob walks away with that limp, and God allows him to take that limp with him. And that's what hits me when I listen to this, because that limp is a blessing. Sometimes we wrestle and we don't get the answers that we wanted. Jacob wasn't necessarily looking to have his hip socket taken out and to have to walk away with a limp. But maybe the reason that God touched Jacob's hip, because sometimes when we encounter God with our questions, it leaves a dent. It leaves a mark. It changes us and transforms us in such a way that we will never be the same. And I know using a limp isn't always the best analogy, especially when we're all facing our day-to-day problems. I got mine, you got yours, right? But don't listen so much to the physical side, but to the mental part. Maybe the reason that some of our questions leave us aching, leave us wandering away fearful and hurting and not sure what's next is because those questions were meant to transform us. They were meant to encourage us to have a stronger faith. They were meant to encourage us to go to the depths of our very dark night of the soul and pose the toughest questions, trusting that the answers will come. If not in that night, if not the next day, the answers will come. And not all questions are going to be answered the way that we want them to be answered. But boy, they're going to shape us. Those answers are going to move us, they're going to shape us, they're going to stretch us, and they are going to empower us to transform into who we need to be. I know that there was that time that we had that dinner here, and we won't get into all that it caused. But the reason we had that Q&A dinner was because there were some really tough questions that needed to be asked. And sometimes we're not brave enough to say, but why? But who are you? But why do you think that way? What makes this okay? How come what you see doesn't look like what I see? Why are your thoughts supposed to be more important than mine? And some of these questions, I say, we never ask them, but you all have your own. And you know what they sound like. You know what happens when you get out of surgery and you end up feeling ill and recovery takes forever. Gosh, why, God? I've been doing everything right. Or when someone comes up to you and says, hey, are you still with that husband of 20 years? Right now at the funeral, you're asking me this question? Are you kidding me? It's amazing. But when the questions come up, after we've sifted and filtered through them, let's take the time to seek the answers for them. They will humble us. They will wake us up. But if we really, really lean into the questions and lean into who we're asking, they will transform us in ways you would never believe. There's a guy named Carl Jung. He is a famous psychologist, and he says that the things we fear and the things we avoid the most are the things that are going to lead us to transformation. He says, what you resist not only persists, but will grow in size. And Jacob literally was resisting meeting his brother. He was resisting trusting God. He was resisting stepping into the fullness of who God created him to be. And so literally God came and wrestled him and forced the questions out of him, forced the doubt out of him, and transformed his life. He walked away with a new identity. Yes, he walked away with a limp, but most of all, he walked away transformed. And so I want to invite you this week, as you are moving through the week, to seek within yourself, what are those questions that are preventing me from moving forward? Maybe a question comes from a broken relationship. You know, I've been blessed and I don't have his permission, but I haven't spoken with my brother in over a year and a half. We did not have a falling out. We don't have any animosity between us that I know of, but for whatever reason, I haven't spoken to him in over a year and a half. I saw something the other day that reminded me of him, and I sent him a text message. And I can't remember, but I think he took 2 days to respond, maybe just one. But his response was inviting me to start again. What if he didn't ask me that question? What if me seeing that on the television, I thought in my mind, gosh, I wonder what Brian would think if I send him a text? The answer was, well, Gina, why don't you find out? And for that, I'm not sure when, but somewhere in the next couple days, my brother and I are going to have a phone date, and we're going to reconnect. And though we haven't gotten on the phone as of yet, we've been texting every day since trying to set up that phone date. That's an easy question. Travis, that's an easy question too. But it's amazing. We have hard ones. We have challenging ones. We have embarrassing ones. But if we don't ask them, how can we really say that we trust God? How can we really say that we trust the path of unfoldment? How can we really say that we trust in ourselves to become who we're called to be? So that's your challenge this week. Find out what questions you're holding in your hands and you're not just willing to say, God, why? Or how? Or when? And I'm going to tell you this like I tell you about prayers. If you genuinely give it up to God, you don't have to ask him every day like the little girl we couldn't hear. But why, God? But why, God? But why, God? Well, we can trust that if we bring the question to God, that God already has provided the answer. And we just need to be patient in the waiting. Are you afraid? Are you excited? Are you sad? Are you happy? Are you confused? Are you clear? Ask questions. Question everything and experience the transformation that you're meant to. Please pray with me. Our most gracious and loving God, thank you so much for your word. Thank you so much for the stories of your followers, of those who questioned you, those who questioned you in the moments of fear, those who questioned you in the moments of excitement. Thank you for beckoning us to question you, for giving us that space where we don't have to know it all, where we don't have to have it all figured out, but we have the right to ask. God, I ask that you would reveal to us over these next days, where are those places in our life that we need to seek more answers, where we need to put words to our doubt and our fears, where we need to face humility and face courage. And God, we thank you for the answers to come. We thank you for the answers that always reside within. And we thank you for Jesus Christ, the answer, the model, the teacher, the way shower, who we know is always ready to give us what we seek. And it's in that beautiful name we pray. Amen.